Hi and welcome to my first video on the Super Metroid integrated level editor, also known as Smile. As the name suggests, this is a piece of software that was made that allows you to edit the rooms and the ROM of Super Metroid. So with this you can basically make your own version of Super Metroid to however you want. So in these I'll do a set of videos, and in this these set of videos I'll be using Smile 2.5. I think there are other versions, and also you're free to use them, but if you want to follow my videos for any hints and tips, using Smile 2.5 is probably the best. I think it's also the most stable, up-to-date version, but I could be wrong on that. So the first thing we're going to do is just open Smile. I know it's going to be quite a slow start, but it's just to make sure everyone is aware of how to do all the basic things. So the first thing you just have to find your ROM and open it. The one thing I will say is if you plan to use Smile, you have to use a ROM that runs at 50 Hertz. So I think that's either the American or Japanese ROMs. If you use a European one, you'll get some sort of error saying that it couldn't process the ROM or something, words to that effect. So we'll go ahead and open the ROM, and this is the first screen you'll be greeted with when you first open Smile. Basically everything's black, and what it wants you to do is just open a room. So I'm just going to pick one at random, and this is a room in Criteria. It's probably a little bit big. Go with this one. This is just nice and small, just to kind of show you the general layout. So this is what Smile looks like. So this is your room that you have in this area here. Obviously, if you have bigger areas like you saw earlier, you'd have to maybe use the scrolls to kind of see the whole level. You have all your tiles that you can use here. All these ones that got crosses are obviously ones that you don't use. And there's loads of different things that on the screen, so the first time you see it, it's kind of there's a lot to take in. So it's quite simple to use Smile, at least to do some basic things. So with your mouse, if you left click, you can place a block, and if you right click and hold, you get a selection, and then that selection appears in what's your clipboard. This is obviously very useful if you've got fairly symmetric rooms, or if you've got loads of blocks like these. Placing them one by one is a bit of a pain, so you can just copy a selection and paste it and just save you a bit of time that way. So just to look on the clipboard, before we even get around to placing any blocks, there's quite a few things to kind of show here. The simplest thing is where my mouse is now, around this area. So this tells you, when you're placing a tile, it tells you what type of tile you're wanting to place. So for these bits of the surroundings here that I've just clicked on, it comes up as solid block. So obviously this prevents Samus from going through the side of the screen or anything like that. If you click somewhere in this middle region of the room, it'll say air X-ray. So this just basically means that you can freely troll through it. It's air, it's fairly obvious. And those are probably the two most common tiles you'll use in Smile. To give you a very quick overview of the others, so air X-ray is the first. Slope, I might talk about in another video as an aside, but basically these are ways in which you can make Samus kind of walk up slopes and do various effects. I'm honestly not that familiar with it, but I will do a very quick video at some point in the future about how to make slopes and make Samus run up them. There's air full X-ray. Now this is where normally when you use X-ray in air, the background or whatever the tile is just goes black, and it just like the X-ray, you just can't see anything. Whereas with full X-ray, it'll appear as like a solid tile, and you can't see through it. So this one's kind of useful if you want to obviously make hidden areas, just to kind of try to trick the player and make them find it just by chance, for example. Treadmill, I've not actually used that off much. So I mean, I can't remember many times in Super Metroid where it appears, so it's probably one to avoid for now. Shootable air, from what I can gather, from what I've seen online, no one seems to know what this is. I think it's just part of the ROM data, and it's just in there. It's probably, and again, another one you probably want to just avoid. Now on some more interesting ones. So horizontal, basically, if you've got a large set of blocks, what you can do is you could set one block to be your, if I just scroll down, there is a shot block. So you can set one block in your, say if you had like a 2x3 set of blocks, you can set one to be the shot block, and you can group them together by using combinations of horizontal and vertical, which is later on in this list. Again, I think I'll probably make, this is the second video I'll make on grouping blocks together and kind of making things work. Air, if you haven't guessed by all the question marks, it's kind of, no one really knows what it is, so my advice, you could probably just ignore it. Bombable air, same sort of thing. I've not seen many uses of this. I mean, if I find any, I'll make an edit to the video, but I don't think it really exists in Super Metroid anywhere. Solid blocks, pretty obvious. I've already explained what that is. Door is, again, that's one for another time, because getting doors to work in Super Metroid isn't exactly an easy thing to do. But basically, it just means it's a door tile. So you see here, it's kind of highlighted blue, and it matches the highlight of these tiles. You basically set a few of these like in a row, and you can make it so they lead out to another room. Normally you'd use these actual door tiles you see here, but it's actually possible to make invisible rooms, and you just pass through, say, the side of a room into another one. There is one or two times in Super Metroid where that does happen, but it's not that commonly used. Obviously, you can do it if you want, but there's not really much need to. Normally, just doors like these, certainly for your first ROM, are probably what you want to do. Spike block, it's pretty obvious. You make a block into a spike block. Normally, you won't normally change like any of these blocks into a spike block. There's normally one of the blocks in here that acts as a spike. I'm not sure if it's okay. It's not in there. Oh no, sorry, it is there. It's right here. So this block is already a spike block. So normally you probably just want to use that versus making one of these tiles a spike block. But yeah, crumble block, pretty obvious. You stand on the block and it crumbles. Shot block, again, you shoot it and it will destroy. I think these can also be bombed open as well. Vertical, I've already explained, it's kind of helping to group blocks together. Grapple block, again, kind of obvious. And bomb block is one that has to be bombed open. These are ones that you can't shoot open. So, yeah, these are different from the shootable blocks, basically. And those are all the blocks there. Again, they're pretty straightforward. If you don't really know what some, say, like shootable air, it's probably just a good idea to just not use them. Underneath it, is show type on map, and this is really useful when you're editing, because say for example I took one of these blocks here and changed its type, so I changed it to the door tile. If I then do show type, you can see that there's a random door tile when it should be a solid block. So this is just a really good way of making sure all your tiles are as they should be. One of the biggest or the easiest things to be mistaken with when you first use Smile is when you've got these air blocks, you accidentally put a solid block instead, and then you're probably wondering why Samus can't pass through what should be, air. So this show type on maps a really useful one to use. Just for sake of argument, I'm going to change that back to the solid block. And to the right of it is graphics. This is pretty easy to understand. So basically there's a different graphics set for each different area. So this is the criteria area. If I go to 8, this all changes to Kraid's area, and I think that's also Red Brinstar. Yeah, so it's kind of Red Brinstar and Kraid basically. And as you can see, it fucks up the graphics, so you probably don't want to do that. Notice that it automatically changes the tiles for you when you change the graphics set. So again, if you were to in a future video, I'll show you how to clone a room, and in that I'll show you how to move it to a different area. And if you do that, you'd want to change the graphics set and redesign it. But for the time being, when you're editing rooms that already exist, you just don't really want to change the graphics set. And also in the clipboard, you have horizontal flip, vertical flip. This is useful for, say, if you've got, I don't think there are any in this room. Actually, there's this one here. So this is like a corner tile. What you can do is if you just do horizontal flip, you change it around like that, and vertical flip, vertical flips it. So this is basically to make sure that there's only ever one tile that is a corner like this, and obviously through the combinations of horizontal and vertical flipping, you can make it, any direction that you want in pretty much. So those are obviously good ones to keep in mind when you're designing your rooms. So just as we're moving up the screen, so as you probably saw when I first started Smile, these numbers and letters here, these refer to the room. So they're basically room pointers. So what a room pointer is, and again I'll cover this in more detail for those who don't really know what pointers are. Basically, these are just bits of information that point to the information in the room. So this 7962A, this is just information to say, okay, this is the name of the room, if you will, and this will point to this room, for example. You'll probably also see at the top right, it's just kind of highlighting saying alternate rooms. Basically, there are certain events in the game that will change the state of rooms. In this case, for example, I think this is the elevator in Criteria that goes down to Meridia or Brinstar. Probably Brinstar, I can't remember. But as you can see, this is just a standard room. There are no events that change the layout of this room. If you go to, say, this first one, which is the room that you land in with the ship in Criteria, there it is. What you end up doing is, you can see here it's now highlighted green for alternate rooms. This is probably the one room that's the most affected by this. So I will cover this in a bit more detail. I think for your first editing, you probably just want to not mess about with events. You probably just want to keep it as, say, a standard one. But there are other things as well. So there's events. So there are events like if you collect the morph ball and missiles, then the room may change. So that's one event, and that actually happens in Criteria. In Brinstar right at the start of the game. There are other things as well, like power bombs and that. So these events can be used to change the graphics of the room. Don't know why that question mark's there. It can change the graphics of the room. So here's a good example. So events 1 here, it looks like this is what happens after you defeat with a brain. So basically you get all these kind of puffs of smoke coming up, and they'll damage Samus if she gets hit by them. But again, you probably don't want to mess about with the events, at least at this stage. I mean, I might do a video in the future about it. But normally just keep it to standard 1. Level doesn't change. It's pretty easy. So that's enough about the clipboard and the general kind of overview. If you want to just place a tile, then I think most people should be able to do this. So just left click on whatever tile you see here. If you're making, say, a ledge in this room, for example, I'd use these tiles. These ones, obviously you can use things like these kind of grey ones that I've highlighted here. But normally, like things like these tiles that show the groups of blocks that you can kind of damage, you don't use that often. But I mean, it's your ROM, do what you like. So let's just kind of make a ledge as an example. So you can just select left click, select the tile, and then just keep clicking like that. And that's a ledge. Obviously, it doesn't look that pretty. You can use the different tiles like these to make a better ledge, like in the actual game. But for the purpose of just making something that you can jump on, that should be fine. You can also, if you wanted to, say, put this whole thing in there, just left click and hold to kind of select it, and then just do that. It's pretty easy. So yeah, that's a basic kind of idea of just the overview of this screen and how to place items. Place blocks. So the next thing to kind of you'll be seen greeted with is BTS. This isn't as complicated as it might seem, but basically these kind of dictate certain events that happen in the game or certain tiles, not to be confused with events like collecting bombs or anything, but just events within the room. So let's go to this example here. This shows it quite clearly. So you probably see here that this has got like a 7 in the corner here, and then these are all just FF. And this is just like a hexadecimal number. One advice I would say is if you don't know hexadecimal, you might want to have like a brief overview of how that works. I might do that in my second or third video when I start using hex more prominently. But for this video, just rest assured, it's just something you will have to learn, but for the time being, just take this all in. So, like I said, this has got a 7 here, and this 7 and all these Fs are these BTS values. So again, these basically dictate what happens to a tile. So in this case, the first 8 you'll be greeted with, so 0 to 3 and then 4 to 7, these are just tile kind of effects, and they're quite obvious. So 0 to 3 means if you destroy the tile, so if you shoot it or bomb it, depending on what it is, after a certain amount of time, it'll respawn. And 4 to 7 basically means it won't. So once you've bombed open in that room, it'll stay destroyed until you leave the room and come back. And obviously these numbers determine these how this 1 by 1, for example, determine the tiles that it spans over. So 2 by 1 in this case means you have 2 columns, so 1, 2, and then 1 row. And that's just kind of something you're just gonna have to just accept and just get used to. You may make a couple of mistakes every so often, but it happens. So they're the ones for editing these tiles, and you'll see here, like I said, it has FF, which is all the way down here. Basically, what FF does is it clones the behavior of this 07 here. So basically all these surrounding tiles, what it's basically saying is that the behavior of this tile should map what is in here. So basically saying if it's in a 2 by 2 and you put that icon there, then these would also behave in the same way. It's just one of the things you need to make sure that grouped tiles function correctly. And so you can see here in the original game, they've split it up. So in this, it's a 3 tile high configuration, but they're split into 2 by 2 and 2 by 1 configurations. And like I said, you can play about with these as much as you like, and you can make it so if you shoot, say, if you bomb open this area here, by placing a bomb where my cursor is now, then it'll only bomb this area. If you place the bomb where my cursor is here after blowing up this bit, it would blow open all 4 of these and these 2. And again, you can use that to kind of make it so when you bomb or shoot certain things, you carve a certain path. And then the last thing to say about the BTS is there's a lot of numbers up to, say, 3F. As far as I'm aware, these are for the different doors you can have in a room. I've not seen many rooms with more than about 7 doors, if memory serves. So generally you probably only want to go up to like 06, maybe 07. when you're creating doors. But again, the whole creation of doors is definitely not an easy thing in Smile, and I'll go through that another day. So like I said, you have all these BTS tiles, which, for the record, because I didn't explain it already, you just click on the Metroid once you've selected your thing, and look at that, it just says drag over tile to change. So click it, drag it, and then it can go like that. So as I was saying, you have all these from 0 to 3F, which I think are for doors. And then you come to these 4. So these are saying to. So this says right door, left door, 4-door, ceiling door. When I make a video about doors, I'll go into a bit more detail, but it's pretty simple. It basically tells you, this is to tell the game how the door should behave. So to take an example, oops, I just clicked there by accident. Go all the way to the left here. The first door you come to in Super Metroid, it has a 41 at the top. So this basically means that this is a left door. That's all it is. You probably see as well there's the FF, so that kind of clones the fact that it's part of this left door. But in doors as well, there's also FE and FD. It's just, again, it's just one of the things you have to accept. So it basically it's to basically clone the rest of the door so that this tile here is not the same as this one, and this one is not the same as that. It's just basically stuff you have to do to make the doors work. And we have these different kind of green highlighted tiles here, which you can probably see in this room. There's a lot of them, and these are your kind of slope tiles. So again, I might do a small aside of this in a video in another time. But these are basically, like I said, here look, they're designed such that when Samus runs, she'll go up and then come down here without having to jump up onto this tile here. And then, just while we're on the screen, just to finish off, there are these tiles, and these are just modify what the blocks do. So they're kind of like an extension of these tiles. So say if you've got like a shot block, this will be one you can open just with your normal beam. But you can see here there's a super missile icon here, so you can make it so that certain shooting blocks can only open by super missiles. And these work exactly the same as these BTS tile modifiers here. So you just click on that, drag it, simple as that. And now you've made that tile so it can only be opened or shot open by a super missile. The difference with these tiles versus these BTS ones is there's an option for respawning. So quite simply, at the moment, if you were to shoot this super missile block, after a certain amount of time, it'll respawn. You have to shoot it again to get through wherever it leads. If you untick that box and then place it again, you'll see the difference is in the non-respawning one, it has no yellow box on the inside. And you can do things with power bombs, speed boost. This is fake grapple blocks. These I think are for your kind of the treadmill icons. I think they are. This one is used by Meridia, by one of the enemies, that kind of claws open the stands. For anyone who's familiar with Super Metroid, you probably have an idea of what I mean. And this one here, I'm not 100% sure that is. It kind of looks like it's an enemy kind of coming out of a block, but for the time being, when you're making your first ROM, probably just should ignore that. So the last thing to mention, again, this is just a simple overview of Smile, and this is the last thing. This is quite easy. So this is just changes the music in the area. And one thing for people who have played Super Metroid before, in this first room, the music changes depending on what the state of the room is. So when you first land, it's empty criteria that kind of plays that kind of really dreary kind of music. If you go to, say, the Power Bombs one, then it plays Samus's theme, which is a bit more kind of upbeat and lively. And then if you go to Events one, this one is kind of the escape theme. Whether I think it might carry on from another room or something. I don't really know how that escape theme works, but it's not come up here. So that's just a basic introduction of just this first screen and all the different clipboards. So making, like I said, you can, if this is a very good screen to start on, which is just, for the record, the first one in this list of levels, and has kind of a little bit of everything inside it. Yeah, and one thing I've not yet pointed out is you'll probably see there are these kind of green boxes and the blue boxes and everything like that. I will probably go into detail about this when I talk about doors, but in essence, these basically tell you how your room scrolls. And so each of these boxes is one screen, as you see on the map. And if, just for the use of Smile, so if you want to test something, so let's go back to our just the standard one, because we don't want the timer or anything appearing. If you want to test anything, you just press E on your keyboard. Let me just change the window size. So change it by that, and then just drag it here. So this just allows you just to test your level, basically. And it'll place Samus where you pressed E. And it's simple as that. So you're probably wondering why this weird purple background appears when you test it. This is, as far as I know, it's only in this room. So don't worry too much if you see it in this room. If you go to another room, for example, just go to the next room in the game, everything seems fine. And hopefully if we go back out to that room, everything's fine. I think it's just an effect of just testing the room in the just testing the room basically. So if you want to test your rooms, you're going to need a SNES emulator. I personally use SNES 9X. If you've got Mac or anything like that, you probably need something else. But SNES 9X is a pretty decent one to go with. Once you finish testing your room, like I said, you'll see this black window. Just click anywhere, and you're back to Smile. So I think the last two things I want to mention in this video then are, the first one is the layers. So again, I'll cover this in more detail, but there are different layers in the room. So at the moment, all the layers are on. So you can see if there are any enemies, that layer will be displayed. Any backgrounds, or so these BTS things here, they'll be displayed. Enemies, and the most important one are layer 1 and layer 2. So layer 1 is the actual kind of layer in which Samus directly interacts with. So this is the foreground, basically. And then layer 2 is what's in the background and kind of gives you all these cool looking things. So for example, if you just press layer 1, there goes all the blocks that you'd stand on. But it still shows you all the BTS tiles and everything. So again, you can just click that to get back on. What I would say is, if you're going to edit the backgrounds, you'd have to go back to this view and then click layer 1, and then anything you edit now should be in layer 2, which is the background layer. If you've got layer 1 ticked any time, you're going to edit in layer 1, regardless of whether layer 2 is ticked or not. So that's just a minor thing to note. So placing the tiles in either layer, so these are the ones that are showing up for criteria, so these different blocks. If you scroll down, there are a couple more blocks. So these ones here are for as you get to the entrance towards wrecked ship, and you've got your underwater different tiles as well. And also again at the bottom gives you some background effects. So you can see right here is exactly what we're seeing in this background beneath the ship. And yeah, it's editing the background layer is as simple as editing the foreground. You just kind of, so let's just go on to the background example. So let's go back to our clipboard, and when we right click, it's very hard to see, but this has just got the piece of the background on it. So here's a good comparison. If you we've not got the foreground on, right click, and that to me looks like a bit of the background. Go to layer 1 and then right click instead, you get what's in the foreground. It's pretty simple, so obviously you can just play around and just test it for yourself. And then the other thing, just to kind of before we finish off, is the map editor. The reason why I show it in this video is because it's one of the easier things in Smile. And it kind of works the same as what I've already showed you. So basically you have these tiles here, you click on it, it shows you what tile has appeared, and you can click anywhere in this grid to make the tile appear. So there are different things. So obviously you've got different shapes of the rooms to kind of help you, different shapes of the tiles, sorry, to help build your room as you want it. One thing I would say is if you're editing just an area, say if you're editing criteria like we are here, if you just click on the reveal hidden tiles, this shows you the physical space that you have to edit within, say, criteria or North Air or Brinstar or whatever you want. It's quite useful to have on, certainly while you're editing. And there's also this one here. So it just says mapping station reveals tile. So let's just turn off the reveal hidden tiles for a second. You can see there are red dots in these ones here, but not anywhere else. If we go back to the room, which when you're on the map screen, you can just press E, it'll take you to the room. So basically what it's saying is that all these tiles here, like the ones that are blue and green, so sorry, the screens which are blue and green, these will be revealed by the map data when you go and get the map data. These ones here, these are designated so that they're not revealed, because obviously this is supposed to be a secret area where you can get some hidden missiles. So just quickly go back to map editor, that's all that does. And like I said, it's pretty easy to use, just click, and you can right click to copy the tile and you can place it wherever you want if that's easier for you. There are other things you can do. Also, you can orient the tiles as you like. Once you finish editing, you just save the map, and when you do, it will just tell you that your Smile has to save and reopen the room. Which normally is fine, unless you've done anything drastic in the room. You normally wouldn't be going to the map editor if your room was in a bad state anyway. Normally, editing the maps is kind of the last thing that you do once you finish the room off. And also, while you're here, you can move where the room appears on the map as well. So, if we wanted to, I can move the location of this room from here all the way down to there, for example. And again, this is very useful for if you're making your own, like editing an area, for example. So you want to move rooms around, you're going to be using that quite a lot, and it moves where your cursor is, I think. So if you hold it, for example, you can drag it like that, and it's as simple as that. And there are other things as well, other introductory kind of things so you can see. So the graphics editor, pretty straightforward. You can edit the graphics. I would say if it's your first ROM that you're making, you probably don't want to go onto this because, um, yeah, if you open it, it's it's quite intensive. You'd have to play around like kind of pixel by pixel editing. Um, Again, if that's something you want to go into, you can do. I personally won't be making a video on this at any point, but it is there if you want to play around with that sort of thing. There's also, again, this background editor, which I will talk a bit more in detail when I kind of show you how to make more intricate things in the room. And there's things like this beauty salon, which allows you to edit Samus. Again, if you want to do that, feel free. I personally won't be doing it. And there are loads of other different options which you can kind of investigate yourself. A lot of them, like in the view, these are quite. There's some which are safe to play around with, and some which aren't. So most of the stuff in the view are fairly safe to edit. And the one thing to point out is if you go to view, then options, and then where my cursor is now, it's ticked on the show scroll areas. I think maybe the first time that you've download Smile and start using it, I don't think this is ticked by default. To show you what this looks like, so let's just untick it and go back to the room. You see all those blue, green, and red boxes have disappeared. So this kind of just shows you what the level looks like if like within game in a way. But certainly for editing purposes, there is absolutely no reason why you wouldn't want that on, unless you're finding it hard to see an edge or something. But I don't think that's really an issue. And then again, this is just to really finish off now. I've been saying it quite a few times, but just to kind of quickly talk you through file and edit. So a lot of these are quite obvious, so I'll only really talk about ones which are really going to matter. So most of the stuff on file, fairly straightforward. What I would say is, certainly for the first time you edit the ROM, I wouldn't really click on anything in here. Whatever the defaults are, like as you can see here, I would just probably leave it. It's quite interesting for some reason that Latin's an option for preferences in the language. Unless you know Latin, probably just keep it on English. Edit's the one that's the one you'll probably be using the most on this toolbar. So just to go from top to bottom then, so room properties, the ones that you're really gonna be using, so this tells you the area that the room's in. There's a debug option at the bottom. You probably never want your room in there. So you've got your criteria, Brinstar, Norfair, wherever you want. And this tells you, this width here where it says 9 and 5, tells you the number of screens that will appear. So if you just close that for a second and cancel so we don't make any changes by accident, you can see, so you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is your width, like it said, and then you've got 5 high. This is one of the larger rooms in Super Metroid, actually. Most of the rooms you'll probably make or edit are probably going to be much smaller than this, and there's nothing wrong with making rooms as big as this. It just means that it's a lot more work in terms of making the background look nice and actually designing the level that makes it interesting. So that's just what the room property does. In my second or third video, I'll talk a bit more about editing the width and height. Certainly for now, I wouldn't edit that if I were you. I think that was off screen when I showed it earlier, so here it is now. So you can see your criteria, etc., your widths. Again, it's really just the area and the width and height numbers that you want to change. But like I said, while you're viewing this video, I wouldn't touch any of these. I'll explain why in one of my future videos. State properties. So I actually bring this into screen this time. It just changes the state of the room. So with a standard one, it just says no value to change. Fair enough. Let's say if we go to event 1, which is a bit more interesting. So this is the one after you defeat Mother Brain. Go to state properties again. And here we've got an event state, which is the Zebes or Zebes, or however you want to pronounce it, the time bomb set. Um, so basically, when you've got these different events, you can change what the event actually is. So you can see this is the time bomb. I've actually defeated with a brain. You can have different events. So for those who know Super Metroid very well, at the end of the game, you can save the Decora it's supposed to be, and the Etacoons at the very end. And there's lots and lots of different events. So a lot of these, so for example, this big Metroid 8 hopper presumably is one of the events that's in Torian at the end of the game. Again, basically with the event states, I probably, when you're first starting to make rooms, for sure I probably wouldn't edit these, and it's just simpler, just keep the standard ones basically. And most of the rooms are standard, with the exception of rooms like this where you have the room you escape through to get to your ship. FX1, I'll probably talk about this in another video, but this basically makes you edit the different effects in a room. That's why it's called FX. So in this room there are no effects. Quite handily, if we go up to this room here, hopefully people will probably recognize this to have lava in it, or acid, whatever you want to call it. So, like I said here, this has got acid / soda as the layer 3, as this is called. And you can change different values here, so it tells you where it starts when you come in, how fast it moves, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. It's pretty obvious, generally speaking. And if you move this scroll bar, you got different things. You got your animate tiles, you got your different palettes. I don't really know what this C is, but I think this just kind of, like you said here, tide, large, and background, warp, cascade, heat. These are just effects that affect the effects, which is a terrible sentence to say. And then you got this A/B. So I think these these just affect the background a little bit even more. Again, this is something that I'd probably just advise you just play around with on your own. As far as I know, I don't think too much damage can be done by playing around with this. But certainly, again, the first few rooms you'll make, you probably won't even use these different effects, to be honest. And this is probably the biggest one to show you out of the entire things that I've shown you already. So these are pointers. Again, I'll do a video dedicated to pointers because these affect a multitude of different things. But I'll just quickly overview them now, just so you're aware. So you've got your level data. This level data tells you, quite simply, what data is in your level. So how you've made your level, the blocks, so on, so like how it's constructed, that's all stored in your level data. And this is just, like I said, this is just a pointer to where that level data is kept. In my second video, I'll explain a bit more about what these numbers in grey and what this number here means, but just accept that it just tells you where that information is kept. FX1, like we just saw, this is just whether it's got lava in the room, whether there's water. Again, it's pretty simple. And there are these pairs, which I'll explain when I come to do a video about enemies. So there's the enemy pop / allowed and enemy set. So quite simply, this is a pointer to the enemies which are allowed in the room, and this one is a pointer to the actual enemies that are in the room. So so to give you an example of this room I've got here. So the enemies that are allowed in the room are these three enemies. So it's just the one type of enemy, and the enemy set has 3 entries for one entry for each of these enemies that you see here. This here is the pointer for the scroll. So this tells you how you transition between screens in a room. Don't worry about this for now. I'll explain that in another video. Again, this one's kind of unknown, so probably just want to just leave that as it is. FX2, I'm not too sure about what this one is actually. I might make an edit to this video in the future, or make a note or something about it when I find it out, but I've not really used this one too much. PLM, I'll do an entire video to this, because what PLMs are anything that's not an enemy and is not the background or foreground. And these include things like this item here, this power bomb. This is called a PLM. If we just close this for a second and go back to this room, this door cap here, which you need power bombs to open, this is also called a PLM. This one is just, there's quite a lot of different PLMs. There are more complicated ones. Again, I'll explain this in a future video. So this is what's called a PLM as well, and this just edits how you transition through this room. Again, don't worry about that, I'll explain that in the future, and for now, certainly from this video, you can just make a basic room without worrying about that sort of stuff. Let's go back to the pointers, just to finish off them. So, this is just BG data, background data. This is layer 1, layer 2. By and large, you probably don't want to change these, because these are just pointers to the information that you see here. Unless, of course, you do go into editing your own backgrounds and changing the tiles and everything, maybe then you want to change these pointers. But as far as I'm aware, as much as I've done so far, I've not changed these from the rooms that I've cloned or anything like that. So I'd probably just leave those as they are. And then the final one is door out. So this points to some information that tells you how many doors are in a room, and to some degree where they all lead to. Again, I will come into that in more detail when I talk about editing doors, etc. But I think this concludes my first video on Smile. I admit I've not really explained a lot in terms of how to do different aspects, but this is really just an overview of Smile and the first screens you see, and it's really useful to get acquainted with everything like that first before you start trying to place things like tiles and doors, etc. Certainly I did the latter, so I just tried clicking everything and placing things, trying to see if it worked, and funnily enough, it really didn't work. I came to quite a few problems quite early on, and I really struggled to try and get things working. So this video does serve a purpose, certainly for those who have never done anything in Smile before. For people who have seen Smile or are aware of it, I obviously apologise for not doing more. But like I said, this just serves as an overview to Smile and the different aspects that you've got here. Like I said, we've explained the clipboard, the BTS and what some of these things do, how to edit tiles to make them behave the same, and there's also the music. I've also said about how you can change a room, so just randomly go to this one. And I've just explained what these different things do in the toolbars. So thanks for watching the video. In my next one, I think I'll probably talk about how to edit doors, because that follows on quite nicely from the stuff that I've mentioned about the BTS, and that's also a fairly simple thing to edit as well. And I'll probably talk a bit about changing some enemies in a room, so changing this enemy for another one, for example, and the same with items. So like I said, thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll come back and watch my second video.